Good evening, everybody. First of all, can I say a very sincere thank you to Stuart and all the team at the US Embassy for organising this event. This whole day, for me, and I was here to experience the second half, it has been a very rewarding experience indeed. I think it's important that we come together and get the opportunity to come together to talk about subjects that we're all passionate about, and you've created an excellent forum today for that interaction and that debate to happen. Is é sin an dríocht atá lastig onan goléir. I was asked recently to write a foreword for an anthology of poems and short stories written by children across County Galway and published by the Galway Education Centre. And within that foreword of that wonderful anthology is that line, Is é sin an dríocht atá lastig onan goléir. That is the magic that is within all of us. And I was referring to the magic of creativity, and particularly the talent that we all possess to stare at a blank computer screen or a blank page and slowly fill it with our thoughts and our dreams. And the work of those children was inspirational and indeed quite moving at times. But most of all, it was an absolute joy to read, because in their writing I sensed complete creative freedom, creativity without boundaries. I got a feeling that writing for this anthology, the children were not afraid to be judged. In fact, they didn't even expect to be judged. They weren't in an exam. There were no marks to be awarded. They were simply writing purely for the joy of writing and to share that joy and that talent with their peers. And having read it, I wondered how we as policymakers and teachers and entrepreneurs and members of government, how we could protect and nurture that creative freedom, so that the 12-year-old girl writing about the Connemara pony would be equally inspired to freely create at 18 years of age, at 28 years of age, and indeed for all of her life. And for many of us in this room, creativity is a talent which we retain, despite having been through an education system that in some cases simply didn't nurture that creativity, and if we're to be really honest, at times actually suppressed that creativity. Einstein once said that if it is the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression. And it is creativity that will be the real currency of the future. It is the currency that will drive innovation in industry, and we have in our power right now, here in Ireland, the tools and the opportunity to fill our young people's pockets with that currency till they are absolutely overflowing. Nicholas Carr, in his 2010 book called The Shallows, he argued that technology was fundamentally altering the way we think, and that because of the internet we are actually becoming shallower people. He argued that instead of diving deeply into a vast ocean of knowledge, we now simply skim along the surface, taking only the knowledge we need right at that time. And in general, I didn't agree with Mr. Carr's negative assessment of the internet. I would argue that the internet allows each and every one of us to access every last drop of that ocean of knowledge, access that wasn't available to any of us 10 years ago. The internet is slowly democratizing learning, and access to boundless knowledge is no longer the preserve of a small minority. However, I did like one passage of Mr. Carr's book, and he went on to describe how the technology of the printing press had fundamentally altered how learning happened about 400 or 500 years ago. Carr describes how after Gutenberg's printing press, the literary mind, once confined to the cloisters of the monastery and the towers of the university, had become the general mind. He argues that that rudimentary technology of the printing press brought knowledge to the masses, and yes, it did. But 500 years later, we now have another groundbreaking technology that has made that knowledge again instantly accessible to everyone at any time and anywhere. There are billions of pieces of knowledge floating around in the ether right now, all around us. And with devices like Google Glass and voice recognition and devices like this, we will soon be able to reach out and grab whatever piece of knowledge we need almost instantaneously. In fact, Sugata Mitra argued last year that we may be heading for a future where he describes, and he calls it a devastating question, and it very much is, are we heading to a future where knowing is obsolete and where it's no longer a necessity to spend time filling our children full of knowledge and then simply testing their ability to regurgitate it at will. Did W.B. Yeats somehow foresee this powerful learning environment of the 21st century when he argued that education is not about the filling of a pail, but instead about the lighting of a fire? Did he foresee a time when our children, unburdened by the need to retain and to regurgitate that knowledge, could finally be free to create new knowledge, free to rediscover the wonder that they experienced when staring up at a bright new world from their cradle? I would like to think so, and I'm so inspired by the work that I see ongoing every day by some incredibly talented, trailblazing teachers across this country. And there are many of them at this event today. They are using technology right now, every day, to create classrooms without boundaries, to empower children to learn better, to move from mechanical, systemic thinking to critical thinking and genuine intellectual creativity. And can I also add, they're doing that with not a lot of resources, and that needs to change. Mitch Resnick, the creator of the Scratch programming language, argues that we need to stop thinking of computers as televisions and treat them more like paintbrushes, a new medium for creative design and creative expression. The technology available to us now obliges us to think differently, we have to, about education, and some would suggest that our students are perhaps likely to suffer if we are too bold in adopting learning technologies. I would argue they will suffer if we are too timid. And if anybody doubts for a moment whether our children are ready for this massive evolutionary shift in education, I would advise them to sit in a coder dojo in any of the 220 of them across this country on a Saturday morning and watch that evolution happening right before their eyes. And I'm sure some of you already have. You've sat and watched and seen the wonder on a child's face when they write their first program on Mitch Resnick's Scratch language. They hit run and they suddenly realize, hey, I'm in charge of the machine. Or the excitement when they write a few lines of HTML and suddenly announce their first personal presence on that wonderful worldwide internet. What's happened in Ireland right now is that our young people, with the help of volunteer mentors and with the help of their peers, are simply teaching one another the skills that excite them and inspire them. And that's why our formal education system has a lot of catching up to do, and we can catch up. In fact, I believe we can go on to lead that digital learning revolution, and that's where our trailblazing teachers come in. We need to celebrate and learn from their innovation and their experience garnered over many, many years. I want to work with teachers. I want to work with young people. I want to work with academics, policymakers, entrepreneurs to begin a new movement right here in Ireland, a movement simply called Excited. Excited will be a movement for innovation and inspiration in digital learning. And our Taoiseach, in his opening speech this morning, he remarked that right now there's a real need for collaboration between enterprise, entrepreneurs, educators, academics, researchers, government, and that through this collaboration we can work creatively and collectively to identify new solutions. And if you add in young people to that mix, you now have a powerful platform for change. And that's exactly what Excited, the digital learning movement, is setting out to do, to facilitate that collaboration, not alone here in Ireland, but hopefully over time across the world. In fact, we are in the early stages of planning an Excited event in the US next year, and I'm hoping that Stuart and his friends in the embassy can help us to get around organising that. Here in Ireland, the first Excited event will be a digital learning festival in Dublin Castle on the 30th and 31st of May. And the primary aim of that event is to bring together those trailblazing teachers from Ireland and from abroad to celebrate and learn from their achievements and to help us, because they're the people with the experience and the wisdom, to chart the way forward for the future of technology and creativity in education. On the Friday of that weekend, we are going to welcome a large representative group of young people from all over Ireland, roughly aged from about 10 to 15, to Dublin Castle, to do something which many might consider quite unusual. We will ask them simply to sit down, or perhaps stand up, whatever they feel comfortable doing, to talk with one another about what inspires them when it comes to learning and when it comes to technology. And we're going to listen in on these conversations, because it's critical in designing new learning experiences that we engage with young people, that we listen to the very significant voice that they have. We will also be appointing young ambassadors, these young digital champions, who will represent that Friday group all the way through the weekend as the conversation continues. And we're also hosting a young EdTech Innovators competition, very, very kindly facilitated by the National Digital Research Council. Excited, the Digital Learning Festival will mark what I hope will be the beginning of a new Irish-born movement for innovation and inspiration in digital learning, and I'm inviting each and every one of you to please be part of this movement. Everyone that's in this room has knowledge and experience that's worth sharing. Excited.ie will be our home. There's a temporary landing page there at the moment. The site's going live in about 72 hours, hopefully. And the learning derived from excited events and that engagement that I want to facilitate will feed into my department's digital education strategy, which is due to be published towards the end of the year. And this strategy can't be a strategy in the old sense, where we publish a 5-year plan that's hopelessly out of date within 3 years. It has to be capable. The strategy itself has to embody innovation, adaptation, and it must be a living, breathing process where young people and teachers, all involved in education, are allowed to play a part in shaping it and reshaping it over and over again. In that anthology of writing that I mentioned earlier on, one 9-year-old boy, he wrote about the evolution of education. And he attempted to predict what the school of the future might look like. And he ended with the words, very simply, the future is a mystery. And it most certainly is. But right now, our children are relying on us to empower them, not to predict that future, but to play an active role in creating it. And I know that if we all work together, we can do exactly that. And isn't that very exciting indeed? Thank you.